Look, we've all been there, right? Letting our fear and anger get the best of us, intentionally expanding the borders of the false world we created.
We are an unusual couple.
It was really so fun getting to play all these different decades throughout Wandavision.
We just don't know what to expect.
And then, of course, everything kind of breaks down and becomes an MCU version of the real world.
Am I dead?
No. Why would you think that?
Because you are.
Can't believe how it just keeps unraveling and unfolding in ways that I am still shocked and thrilled by.
Wanda, I think something's wrong here. I think it's going to be really satisfying for people when they realize what is at the heart of this show.
This is our home.
Then let's fight for it.
How's it going, everybody? It's Freddy. Welcome back to my channel, the Unscreen, where we talk all thing about movies and TV shows. WandaVision episodes 1 and 2, now on Disney+, are absolutely full of MCU and Marvel Comics references, including clues to the plot. The first 2 episodes of WandaVision have finally released, and here are all the major MCU Easter eggs. Viewers have waited quite some time for fresh MCU content, with even Marvel Studios forced to reschedule releases as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, at last, Phase 4 has officially begun, although not quite in the way everybody was expecting. WandaVision is the first TV series produced by Marvel Studios, streaming exclusively on Disney+. Starring Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany as Scarlet Witch and Vision, WandaVision is unlike anything seen in the MCU to date. It's a homage to classic sitcoms such as The Dick Van Dyke Show, Bewitched and I Love Lucy, set in a strange world where nothing is as it seems. The first 2 episodes rejoice in that weirdness, going to great lengths to avoid dropping any major clues. Still, for all that's the case, attentive viewers will notice a number of major Easter eggs, and some of them point to a plot in which Wanda Maximoff's mind has fractured even as her powers expand. The opening of WandaVision Episode 1 is a homage to Bewitched, as is the way Scarlet Witch uses her powers in the MCU TV show, with telekinesis in particular used to look after the house. It's a fun development, but odd to see Wanda operating with this degree of precision. Still, as the episode continues, it becomes clear she doesn't have full control over her powers just yet, with Dinner with the Hearts almost going catastrophically wrong. WandaVision Episode 1 reveals Vision apparently has an indestructible head, a slightly wince-worthy revelation given that certainly wasn't true in the MCU, where Thanos crushed Vision's head in order to tear out the Mind Stone. The reality Scarlet Witch is living in is one where everyone lives happily ever after, and consequently Vision has been reborn with that particular vulnerability removed. Vision's other powers largely correspond with the MCU, although apparently he has night vision, which is an odd addition. The calendar in WandaVision Episode 1 shows the story is taking place on August 23rd. Avengers number 238 is an important issue, in that it sees Vision reactivated after an earlier adventure in which he was deactivated after passing through a magical energy field. This may well be a subtle warning that everything taking place in WandaVision exists within a similar reality bubble, and that Vision should not attempt to pass out of it by any means. WandaVision is like an old sitcom, complete with trailers. The first one is pretty obvious, in that it's an advertisement for a revolutionary new toaster made by Stark Industries. This may seem like a fairly harmless, amusing Easter egg, but it's important to remember Stark Industries is associated with significant trauma in Wanda's life. Sokovia was locked in civil war throughout Wanda's life, and when Wanda was just 10 years old her apartment building was struck by mortar fire. She and her brother Pietro were trapped in the rubble for 2 days, staring all the time at an unexploded bomb that lay just 3 feet from them, fearful that any movement could set it off. The mortar shell was emblazoned with the logo of Stark Industries, and it led Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver to initially view the Avengers with disdain due to their association with Stark. The traditional Sokovian greeting may seem like an amusing gag, but it's actually more than a little disturbing. It's evocative of Avengers Age of Ultron, where Scarlet Witch attacked the Avengers by placing her hands around their heads and manipulating their minds. Notice that, in WandaVision Episode 1, Wanda places her hands over Mr. Hart's eyes, perhaps signifying this time she is blinding people to the true nature of reality itself. WandaVision Episode 1 ends with a scene confirming Westview is being carefully monitored, and it gives a glimpse of the SWORD logo. In Marvel Comics, SWORD is an organization who monitor Earth to protect the planet from extraterrestrial threats. A recent Wandavision poster confirmed they've been redesigned a little for the MCU, given a new acronym. They are now the Sentient Weapon Observation Response Division. In other words, they are responsible for monitoring and policing superhumans. The MCU's sword is seemingly the next evolution of the Sokovia Accords, viewing superhumans as sentient weapons, not as people, and no doubt they'd be particularly concerned about Wanda given her role in Captain America: Civil War. It's possible the names on the screen are sword members, because Abe Brown was a graduate of Midtown High in Spider-Man: Homecoming. He survived the snap, and graduated in Avengers Endgame's 5-year time jump. Given his connection to Peter Parker, it would make sense for Sword to recruit him. Younger viewers may be somewhat bemused at the fact Vision and Wanda have separate beds at the beginning of WandaVision Episode 2. This is actually a smart reference to censorship in the early days of television, when the British Board of Film Classification insisted there should be no portrayals of men and women in bed together. The BBFC's rules caught on in the US, with the production code stating, the treatment of bedrooms must be governed by good taste and delicacy. The implied sex scene resulting from Wanda's moving the two beds together would never have been approved by censors, however tame it may be by modern standards. Two particularly interesting Easter eggs are visible in an animated scene where Wanda is shopping in a local store. There's a reference to Bova milk. In the comics, Bova was Wanda's nursemaid. She's actually a mutated cow, transformed by an insane scientist named the High Evolutionary. The most important Easter egg here, however, is a reference to Auntie A's kitty litter. There's been intense speculation Agnes is actually Agatha Harkness, a powerful sorceress who has played a major role in Scarlet Witch's life in the comics. She is indeed often referred to as Auntie Agatha, notably by Franklin Richards, son of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, who she helped bring up. What's more, Agatha is well known for her black cat, Ebony. WandaVision Episode 2 strongly suggests the real world is attempting to break into Westview's reality bubble. One key scene sees Wanda discover what looks like a futuristic toy helicopter in the hedge. The colors are reminiscent of Tony Stark's Iron Man, but the helicopter bears the logo of SWORD. It's interesting to speculate that this was a real helicopter that attempted to get into Westview, and that Scarlet Witch's magic rewrote it into a form she could just about handle in this reality. Vision appears to sense these intrusions as well, talking about security patrols around the town shortly after. WandaVision Episode 2 introduces Emma Caulfield as Dottie, who is essentially the local tyrant. The episode celebrates the casting by featuring bunny rabbits in a prominent role, a detail that will delight any fans of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There, Caulfield played Anya, a former vengeance demon who, among other things, hated bunnies with a passion. In the famous musical episode, Once More with Feeling, Anya suggested bunnies could be responsible for plunging Sunnydale into chaos. Bunnies aren't just cute like everyone supposes, she rocked. They got them hoppy legs and twitchy little noses. WandaVision Episode 2 may well offer viewers a clue Sword are unaware of, however. One line of dialogue tosses out the line, the devil's in the details. In the comics, Scarlet Witch's madness was eventually revealed to have been amplified by a powerful demon that sought to cause chaos on Earth. Meanwhile, the line also evokes Mephisto, Marvel's version of the devil and the Lord of Hell. Disturbingly, Scarlet Witch accidentally repurposed pieces of Mephisto's broken soul when she rewrote reality to give herself children in the comics, which makes this Easter egg pretty dark, given Episode 2 ends with Wanda pregnant. Mephisto has also been teased for Loki, so this could be a hint at that as well. WandaVision Episode 2 ends with reality warping around Scarlet Witch and Vision, turning to full glorious Technicolor. Notice the reality warp is preceded by the color red, however, which is the color usually associated with Wanda's own magic in the comics. It's another hint Scarlet Witch is herself the cause of the chaos taking place in Westview. As we all know, WandaVision, the first 3 episodes are out and we have kind of no idea what exactly is going on. We see things about Hydra and Sword agents, we believe Mephisto and Grim Reaper are really the ones pulling the strings in this reality, and we also know that this will connect to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness at some point. But we never know when. But now the head writer and executive producer Jack Schaefer has opened up about Episode 4 as well, and now I can tell you we all gonna get some answers of WandaVision Episode 4 this Friday. As I just mentioned, executive producer and head writer Jack Schaefer was interviewed by Heroic Hollywood, where she shared some interesting things. She said during the first 3 episodes you barely understand what exactly is happening to WandaVision. But you definitely have an idea that something is terribly wrong, and they asked when exactly are we going to be getting some answers, and which Jack Schaefer replied, oh, if only I could say the things that I want to say, how would I describe it, this is cheesy. You all might get some answers in episode 4, the next episode that we're going to see in the WandaVision series. And we also heard a rumor that we are going to get 4 or 5 episodes down the road this upcoming Friday. This isn't hearsaying, but she said we will start answering some questions and clarifying what's going on though our next episode. I don't want to spoil it by telling you how we do it. But there are answers to be had in the upcoming episodes, so there's going to be a huge reveal in the next episode, and I think episode 4, 5, and 6 are all actually going to be pretty revealing. Few days back, Same Things Paul Bettany said that WandaVision is kind of broken off into 3 different parts. The first 3 episodes are the beginning, kind of the introduction, where you know something's wrong but you don't know what it is. Then he said the final 3 episodes are when things start to get really crazy. There's a lot of battles, and apparently there's a battle that has more CGI than Avengers Endgame, but he didn't say that much about this. So now we all know that WandaVision episode 4 are going to be pretty revealing. We can assume that episodes 4, 5 and 6 are the big reveals of the series. Today I have some exclusive WandaVision news that there's a possibility that Scarlet Witch could be responsible for the emergence of the mutant gene, and there's also a theory that Scarlet Witch affected all mutants in the House of M 2005 comic storyline. I will break down the full story. With each new episode, WandaVision makes a point to showcase just how strong Scarlet Witch is getting, and it could be because it's gearing up to position her as the mother of mutants across the globe. Wanda has been a recurring character in the MCU since 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron, and in that time she's experienced an exponential growth in power from once simply being able to manipulate minds and move objects. However, even with all that power, she hasn't been able to save the people in her life, such as her brother, Quicksilver, or even her lover, Vision. After being forced to destroy the Mind Stone along with Vision's consciousness to save the world from Thanos, Wanda could only watch in horror as the Med Titan reversed time in order to take the Mind Stone from Vision himself, performing the snap and killing Wanda and half the universe's population in the process. Even now that the people lost in the decimation have returned, Wanda still seems to be bearing the scars of her trauma, both from Thanos and before. The series picks up mere weeks after the ending of Avengers Endgame, dropping audiences into a black and white domestic fantasy based on the tropes of 50s sitcoms, in which Wanda and Vision are a happily married couple in the middle of a cheery neighborhood named Westview. However, after the most recent episode, audiences are now aware that there's much more going on behind the scenes, as the intergalactic peacekeeping organization SWORD is now actively monitoring Scarlet Witch's situation. With everything going on, it's easy to see that Wanda's powers have grown into the realm of her full-blown reality manipulating abilities from the comics, allowing her to imprison the town of Westview and even create her own children within her ill-fated fantasy. While that in and of itself is terrifying, there's also another subtler implication there. If Wanda's powers can rewrite reality and ostensibly bring people like Vision back from the dead, it's entirely possible they could create other superhumans, too. The concept of Wanda warping reality is directly influenced by the classic comic book storyline House of M, which played out over the course of 8 issues back in 2005. While WandaVision is nowhere close to a straight adaptation, the core idea of both series shares similar strands of DNA, with Wanda constructing a pocket reality after severe mental trauma. Just like in the show, Wanda's powers trap the citizens of the Marvel Universe in a transformed timeline that they have no recollection of entering. But the big difference in the comics is that House of M takes place on a global scale, something the MCU might replicate if all of Marvel's Phase 4 is a House of M adaptation. But most comic book fans recognize that House of M isn't as iconic as it is just because of Wanda's alternate reality shenanigans. At the end of the book, after Wanda realizes what she's done and just how traumatized she and her brother, Pietro, have been thanks to their father Magneto's extremist views on mutant-human relations, she lashes out and utters the phrase "no more mutants," which initially seems to reverse her changes and transform the world back to normal. However, readers and heroes in universe quickly realize the disturbing truth of Wanda's words. She didn't just erase her changes to the timeline, she actually depowered a massive swath of the mutant population, turning a species that once ranked in the tens of thousands to just hundreds, nearly rendering mutants extinct. Scarlet Witch's actions in House of M eventually became known as the decimation to the mutant community and would have long-standing and far-reaching consequences for years to come. Yet it's possible the live-action universe could reverse engineer this event to introduce mutants to the MCU. Episode 4 of WandaVision introduced several major players within S.W.O.R.D. moving forward and also gave audiences a glimpse at the inner workings of their investigation into the Westview phenomenon, but there was also an important reveal slipped into the episode that is easy to miss. During her investigation, Darcy discovers that the town of Westview is emitting low levels of a very specific radiation signature referred to as cosmic microwave background radiation. CMBR is an actual phenomenon in the real world tied to leftover energy from the expansion of the universe, but it's also directly tied to the Infinity Stones in fiction because of the fact that they were born into existence during the Big Bang. This means that Wanda's powers emit the same cosmic radiation that turned her and her brother into superhumans in the MCU. In the comics, cosmic radiation and extra-dimensional energies have been responsible for giving dozens of characters powers, such as the Fantastic Four and Monica Rambeau, the latter of which is currently in WandaVision and the former soon to be introduced into the MCU. While the town of Westview is what Wanda's powers look like operating on a contained scale, there's no reason to believe she couldn't expand her area of influence onto a much bigger scale. Wanda's powers have never stopped growing, and as far back as Age of Ultron she was capable of detonating enormous shockwave-like blasts of energy, something she used to take out almost an entire army of Ultron drones in the moment she felt Pietro's death. It's entirely possible something happens in the finale of WandaVision that pushes Wanda even further, causing her to blast out her powers on a mass scale and activating latent mutant genes in a huge swath of the population, particularly as it looks as though the show is setting her up to be someone S.W.O.R.D. considers a threat in the MCU. Wanda lashing out against that would be a perfect response to the trauma and experiences that Wanda has already gone through in the MCU. Not only has she lost her parents, her brother, and her love, but her abilities indirectly led to a tragedy that caused the world to view her as a menace and question the autonomy of superpowered beings. It would make perfect sense for her to want to disrupt the status quo by adding more superpowers to the equation, forcing the people in charge of structures like the Sokovia Accords and S.W.O.R.D. to contend with the fact that the world is rapidly changing around them in ways they'll never be able to control. On top of this is also the recent birth of Wanda's own children, characters who will presumably grow up to become the MCU versions of young Avengers Wiccan and Speed. Growing up with Scarlet Witch as a mother and powers of their own, her children face a severe risk of being ostracized for their connection to her, so creating an entire new species of beings might have also been a protective reflex on Wanda's part. For better or worse, the mutant community frequently sticks together in the face of the prejudice and fear-mongering that regular humans throw their way. While WandaVision hasn't directly confirmed this path as their endgame, having Wanda Maximoff be the mother of mutants in the MCU would be the perfect way to pay homage to her legacy as a major force within X-Men comics, as well as finally giving her the respect and storytelling depth she's always deserved in the MCU. So WandaVision Episode 6 out. If you haven't watched yet, go and check out, and I must say WandaVision Episode 6 does an incredible job at giving you a little bit more details each time, but also making it still confusing enough to make you crave the next episode for answers. There are so many things packed into one episode. The show started with a slow burn approach, but Marvel Studios' first Disney and TV series is now clearly building towards a dramatic climax. Many of the mysteries have been revealed, not least that Scarlet Witch is indeed the one responsible for creating Westview's sitcom-based false reality, but there are still so many unanswered questions. So let's take a look. WandaVision Episode 6 sees Wanda Maximoff don the costume of the Scarlet Witch from the comics, and it certainly proves why Marvel Studios tend to avoid straightforward page-to-screen outfits. Suffice to say, this design, which Wanda wore in the comics during her time with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and her early years with the Avengers, looks far better as a Halloween costume than it would in a blockbuster movie. Wanda suggests in the MCU this is the traditional garb of a Sokovian fortune teller. This mirrors the comics, where for years Wanda thought her mother Natalia was a fortune teller, recently learning Natalia was the previous Scarlet Witch. This particular Easter egg may look like fan service, but it has the potential to be quite important down the road, and Vision also wore his traditional comic book costume. The overall design is hilarious, right down to the diamond shape where in the MCU, the Mind Stone is positioned. Vision claims this was the only thing in the closet when he got up in the morning, Wanda rewriting reality to force him to participate in Halloween, but later he seamlessly transitions between the costume and his MCU look. This reality is a lot more unstable than even Vision realizes. Interestingly, even the Wanda and Vision's kids Billy and Tommy get in on the act, wearing the costumes they adopted in the comics as the superheroes Wiccan and Speed. Billy dons an outfit replete with a red cape, while Tommy wears a homage to Quicksilver. Marvel is believed to be setting up a Young Avengers arc of some kind, so hopefully, it won't be the last time these two are seen in costume, although next time it will be played straight, rather than something of a joke. Amusingly, Tommy is initially reluctant to wear a costume, insisting he's the cool twin. That seems to be a joke on the lack of superhero outfits in Fox's X-Men films, given he's trying to be just like his uncle Pietro. The twins Billy and Tommy possess the same powers as Scarlet Witch and Vision. Tommy promptly uses his abilities to race through Westview at super speed and carry out pranks, very much true to his comic book iteration, while Billy senses Vision's impending death. It's interesting to note he appears to possess telepathy and telekinesis, but so far hasn't demonstrated the reality warping powers Wanda is displaying in Wandavision. Again, that detail may be significant, given Wanda can't remember how she got a power-up in the first place. Quicksilver jokingly refers to the twins as demon spawn, a line of dialogue that may seem like just a joke, but is rather on the nose. In the comics, Scarlet Witch created Billy and Tommy using fragments of Mephisto's soul, a character who is Marvel's representation of the devil, a senior demon who rules over a hell dimension. So in the comics, these two were quite literally demon spawn, although it remains to be seen whether the same is true in the MCU as well. The adverts in WandaVision have always had sinister undertones, but the one in episode 6 is particularly striking. Where earlier ads have referenced events in Wanda's life, the Magic ad appears to sum up the general theme, the idea that, for all her power, Wanda has been unable to drive back death itself. Now she has unlocked the magic that lay within her, and she is attempting to reverse all her losses. Look closely at the cinema billboards behind Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and you'll see the movies showing are The Incredibles and The Parent Trap. As anachronous as that combination may be, it's quite appropriate. The Incredibles is a Pixar film about a superhero family, including a young super speedster, while The Parent Trap involves two people switching identities and accents. Vision uses his awakening power to free Agnes for a moment, and she immediately recognizes him as one of the Avengers, before remembering he's dead, and essentially having a nervous breakdown at the insanity of all this. Agnes' brief awakening may serve to resolve theories she is actually Agatha Harkness, a major sorceress in the comics, and the true mastermind behind Wanda's power-up. Instead, she seems to just be another victim. The comic book version of Monica Rambeau is a superhero who has gone by various code names, ranging from Spectrum to Captain Marvel, and she gained her powers after being exposed to extra-dimensional energy. Apparently, the experience of traveling through the Hex twice has begun the process of transforming Monica's cells on a genetic level, presumably soon to grant Monica superpowers. It's going to be fascinating to see how powerful Monica becomes in the MCU, and how she interacts with Carol Danvers in Captain Marvel 2. The Halloween celebrations include a glimpse of a very familiar face, the eyes traditionally associated with Spider-Man's mask. This appears to be the famous black costume, however, rather than the typical Spider-Man outfit. If that is the case, it may well be a nod to the infamous One More Day arc in which Peter Parker struck a deal with the devil to save the life of his beloved Aunt May, at the cost of his marriage to Mary Jane Watson. Note the sinister, almost hellish fire effects around the Spider-Man shapes. As their argument progresses and her grip on reality begins to fracture once again, Wanda turns to Pietro, and sees his body riddled with bullet holes. This is clearly reminiscent of the death of the MCU Quicksilver in Avengers Age of Ultron, and the brief scene should be seen as an indication of how Wanda's mind is breaking down under the strain of all this reality warping. It's difficult to forget a key speech by Doctor Strange in Avengers 503 when he warned just how dangerous someone who can manipulate reality. Can you understand the delicate mindset of a woman, a person who has control over reality? He asked the Avengers. It means reality controls her. Imagination becomes the enemy. Structure disappears. Wanda's very grip on reality is slipping away. It's not like your dead husband could die twice, Quicksilver observes bluntly, prompting an extreme reaction from Wanda, as she wills reality away once again. It's interesting to note Quicksilver knows Vision is dead, even though he seems to originate from an entirely different reality. This is the knowledge he really shouldn't have, suggesting there's still more going on in WandaVision than meets the eye. As we all watch the WandaVision episode 6 where Scarlet Witch expands the Hex, and turned the sword base and agents into a circus and clowns. So as I told you in my last video, I'll tell you why she did that. Scarlet Witch expanded her Hex in WandaVision episode 6, absorbing the temporary sword base, and making it a circus while some of its agents became clowns. As her fantasy reality becomes more threatened, Wanda is getting more motivated to preserve the illusion. It appears that Vision would be one of the biggest threats to this pocket bubble as her husband attempts to get to the bottom of what's happening in Westview. It didn't help that Scarlet Witch herself hasn't been careful with how she uses her magic around other people, making her husband more suspicious. Aside from inside forces threatening her bubble, Wanda also has to deal with S.W.O.R.D. and their sketchy director, Hayward, who may be up to no good, particularly considering how he's tracking Vision's body. Scarlet Witch already warned the organization to stay out of Westview, but before they can even make another move to infiltrate it, the final moments of WandaVision episode 6, all new Halloween Spooktacular, have already derailed their plans. Out of desperation to save Vision as he tried to come out of the magical border, Wanda expanded the Hex significantly, resulting in the sword base and some of its operatives getting sucked into Westview. Interestingly, this transformed them into clowns, while their infrastructure became a circus tent. As previously established, things that get absorbed into Scarlet Witch's pocket reality change appearances to fit the aesthetic of her fantasy world. That's the reason why Monica Rambeau's clothes were changed into the 60s and 70s style, while the sword agent who was wearing the organization's hazmat suit transformed into a beekeeper when they entered the bubble. There's a deeper meaning to S.W.O.R.D. becoming a circus, however, this transformation revealed Wanda's real thoughts about them. As Evan Peters Pietro mentioned in the same WandaVision episode, the people of Westview were transformed into something that still somehow reflects their real-world identities. This means that S.W.O.R.D's form inside the Hex is a low-key insult to the organization. Scarlet Witch is essentially calling them a joke, because of their sketchy dealings. While they may seem like a group working for the good of mankind with their various endeavors, they seem to have their nefarious motivations for doing what they do, particularly where Vision is involved. Wanda's not the only one who has this sentiment. Monica Rambeau, Darcy Lewis, and Jimmy Woo are also suspicious of S.W.O.R.D., particularly Hayward. Ever since it was revealed that they're experimenting on Vision's body, followed by his secret plan to assassinate Scarlet Witch inside the Hex, the trio has been more convinced that Hayward is no ally. Soon, they were kicked out of the operations when they openly criticized Hayward's leadership following a tense encounter with Wanda just outside the mystical barrier. Fortunately, they found a way to stick around. Once Darcy was able to infiltrate S.W.O.R.D's program, their hunch was proven right when they found out that not only is Hayward tracking Vision's body, but also keeping an eye on Monica, who may have gotten her powers from Scarlet Witch's magic after her time inside Westview. With just 2 episodes left, there are still so many questions that need answers, but in the last episode of WandaVision, we got the real villain behind this. Agatha Harkness was the one behind all this. But there are still several theories are going around here, including Mephisto, Nightmare, and Scarlet Witch herself. That said, there's also a good chance that S.W.O.R.D's sketchy operations may be a contributing factor to the Maximoff anomaly, especially if they're using Vision's body for the wrong reasons. Considering that Wanda has personal knowledge of who the superhero-hating Hayward is, she must know about him and his organization's seemingly nefarious activities. So that's all, guys, at this point. If you haven't watched the WandaVision episode 7 yet, then go and watch. WandaVision is getting interesting with each episode. As of now, only 2 episodes are left. But there are still so many questions that need answers.
Is she asleep?
Mommy's not sleeping, honey. She's just resting her eyes.
Mom, my head feels weird. It's like really noisy. I don't like it.
Resting her eyes.
How's it going, everybody? It's Freddy. Welcome back to my channel, the Unscreen, where we talk all thing about movies and TV shows. So the WandaVision episode 7 finally gave us some answers, and if you haven't seen it yet, and because today I'm going to reveal many new factors about Agatha Harkness. It was Agatha Harkness the whole entire time. Wanda was not the one responsible for everything that was happening secretly behind the scenes. It was Agatha Harkness, the nosy neighbor Agnes, and kudos to Marvel Studios for making us kind of doubt that Agnes was actually Agatha Harkness. But now all has been revealed. But I think there's still more to this that we have not seen yet. The mysteries of WandaVision are finally beginning to be explained in episode 7, with a lot of Easter eggs, deep cuts, and references to the MCU and Marvel Comics. Marvel Studios is best known for producing blockbuster movies, and as such it is entirely appropriate WandaVision seems to be following a 3-act structure. The first few episodes established the concept, the middle episodes began to unravel it, and now it is heading for the dramatic 3rd-act confrontation between the forces of good and evil, even if it isn't entirely clear just who is on which side. Wanda begins to learn the truth about the false reality she has constructed around the town of Westview, while Vision learns of his tragic fate in the real world. The thread of sword hangs in the background, with director Hayward hatching his own plans to obtain Vision. But 7th episode is packed with twists and turns, setting up a brand new superhero in the MCU and ultimately revealing the character who appears to be the big bad of the entire series. Let's start with a recurring Easter egg, the fact Wanda keeps having a bowl of cereal for breakfast called Sugar Snaps. This, of course, is a subtle reference to Thanos the Mad Titan, the one who cost Wanda everything she loves. Thanos was determined to achieve his insane goal of rebalancing the universe by using the Infinity Stones to erase half a life in the cosmos, a horrific feat he accomplished by snapping his fingers. The opening title sequence of WandaVision episode 7 suggests Wanda's world is collapsing to the point she is utterly self-absorbed, with Vision added in as almost an afterthought. Even the radio station she's listening to a few moments later is called WNDA. But look closely at the intro and you'll also see a hint of another shadowy presence manipulating life in Westview, because one of those messages is pretty sinister. "I know what you are doing, Wanda," it reads. By the end of the episode, it's pretty clear who has left this message, and they're actually tweaking the title sequence as the most overt piece of meddling to date. The commercials in WandaVision have always been crucial, usually focused on Wanda's past experience of trauma. But the one in episode 7 is particularly important, because it directly references something called a nexus. This apparently allows an individual to anchor themselves to the reality of their choice. Side effects include feeling your feelings, confronting your truth, seizing your destiny, and possibly more depression. This is clearly a reference to the nexus of all realities, an established part of Marvel lore that was already subtly introduced into the MCU's multiverse in Thor: The Dark World. In the comics, the nexus was created by an ill-thought-through spell woven in the Florida Everglades, and it became guarded by the Man-Thing. The comics have also introduced so-called nexus beings, rare individuals who have the ability to profoundly shape their dimension. Scarlet Witch is in fact one such nexus being. This is quite a deep cut into Marvel lore, however, and the advert appears to be referencing the nexus of all realities rather than the nexus beings. WandaVision episode 6 revealed repeated exposure to the hex itself was transforming Monica's cells, and her decision to push through it once again means she becomes something new. The crossing over is fascinating, with Monica splintering apart into different versions of herself before pulling herself back together by sheer force of will. This is accompanied by voices that represent her memories, including a few lines of dialogue from her mother in Captain Marvel, that parallels her being restored after she was snapped out of existence, as seen in episode 4. Monica may have known Carol Danvers when she was a child, but she seems to have a grudge against Captain Marvel, presumably because the interstellar superhero disappeared off into space for much of her life. For all that's the case, though, as Monica forces her way through the hex she hears comments from both Carol and Nick Fury, and the latter is particularly interesting. He tells her to learn to glow like your Aunt Carol, foreshadowing the superpowers Monica will gain if she forces her way through into Westview. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has a new superhero, Sword Agent Monica Rambeau, who has finally gained the powers of Spectrum. These are only briefly seen in WandaVision episode 7, with Monica discovering she is now able to perceive the flow of energy around Westview. When Wanda knocks Monica to the ground, she manages to make what Deadpool would call a perfect superhero landing, and white energy crackles around her. Wanda's investigation of Agnes' basement leads to her discovering what appears to be an ancient temple, presumably the center of the Nexus in Westview. It's hard to pin the visual design. Some aspects seem reminiscent of the Florida Everglades traditionally associated with the nexus of all realities in the comics, while others are evocative of a dimensional plane called the Witch's Road in James Robinson's Scarlet Witch run. But the most important object is clearly a book of dark magic, stylistically similar to the Book of Cagliostro from Doctor Strange or the iron-bound books of Shumagorath and Vathalos the Blind in the comics. Now I'm going to start talk about Agatha Harkness. She is the real villain of WandaVision. What role the Fox version of Quicksilver is actually playing. Here, what happened to the twins, talk about that mystical book inside of Agatha's lair, and what I think is going to happen in WandaVision and the future of the MCU. There's been intense speculation Catherine Hahn's Agnes is actually the sorceress Agatha Harkness, a shades of grey character from the comics who uses magic for her own ends and has served as both ally and enemy to Wanda. That theory is finally confirmed when Agatha formally introduces herself as the villain of WandaVision, the one who has been subtly disrupting the Westview reality, and who killed Wanda's dog Sparky. Notice that, while Wanda's powers manifest with a red color, Agatha's take on the color purple. WandaVision Episode 7 ends with a post-credits scene that appears to suggest Monica has now fallen under Agatha Harkness' influence. She encounters Agatha's pawn Quicksilver, and her eyes subsequently glow purple. But the post-credits scene is equally important because it suggests WandaVision is now moving away from its sitcom approach towards a standard MCU story, making this a smart meta touch. So we just got WandaVision Episode 8, and this episode was not quite what a lot of people were expecting. However, it was a pretty good one, where we learned a lot about Wanda's backstory, including the fact that she was a witch and had powers before coming in contact with the Infinity Stone. As I mentioned before, the 7th, 8th, and 9th episodes are going to be more crucial, where we get lots of answers. In WandaVision 7th episode we got our main villain behind all this. It was Agatha Harkness all the time, and now in 8th episode finally reveals the truth about Agatha Harkness, Scarlet Witch's backstory, and many more things. So today I'm going to reveal some interesting factors about Wanda's Vision 8th episode. WandaVision Episode 8 shows the story builds towards its climax, but it's still filled with stunning Marvel Comics references. The mysteries of WandaVision are finally being laid bare, with Agatha Harkness stepping forward as the show's real villain, with parts of her origin revealed here. But it seems Wanda's power far outstrips Agatha's own, and the ancient sorceress is keen to understand just how a neophyte like Wanda Maximoff has become so powerful. All that leads into WandaVision Episode 8, which interrupts the regular programming to reveal what has happened in the past. This is an episode that revisits the backstory of Wanda Maximoff in the MCU, revealing truths that had long been hidden, and in doing so rewriting the history of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe and recontextualizing past movies. Over the last few years, Marvel Studios has become increasingly creative with opening renditions of their logos. Think the Stan Lee tribute for Captain Marvel, the dust effect for Avengers Endgame, and even the redesigned Black Panther intro in honor of Chadwick Boseman. WandaVision Episode 8 opens with the usual Marvel logo turning a bright purple, the trademark color of Agatha Harkness's magic, reflecting the fact she has taken control of the show. In the comics, Agatha Harkness is an ancient and ageless sorceress who was alive when Atlantis fell beneath the waves. She doesn't appear to be quite so old in the MCU, instead of dating back to the Salem witch trials of 1693, where she was a rogue member of a witches' coven. Agatha was placed on trial for her crimes, with her mother leading an attempt to execute her, but whatever dark magic she had mastered allowed her to instead drain the coven's life energy into herself. It's possible Agatha has continued to prey on other sorcerers since then, drawing their magic into herself, increasing in power over the centuries. Agatha Harkness was involved in the Salem witch trials in the comics as well, but in a slightly different role. She was their orchestrator, approving of the persecution of witches. She believed these were necessary to cull the weak, and even secretly volunteered members of her coven to be executed. The MCU's approach seems to be a different one, suggesting Agatha's experiments with dark magic were the cause of the persecution, with her coven eventually discovering the truth and attempting to kill her. The famous witch trials ended in 1693, presumably because Agatha had moved on and her coven had been killed. When Agatha's mother joins the attempt to kill her daughter, she manifests her full power in a stunning crown akin to a witch's headdress in the comics. The design is reminiscent of an ancient sorceress named Géardenes in Marvel Comics, perhaps suggesting this coven learned Atlantean magic. If that is the case, the Book of Magic in Agatha's basement could well be the tome of Géardene, who was banished from Atlantis, but whose spirit lived on after death to ensure her teachings were not forgotten. It is even possible the mysterious runes used by Agatha Harkness to restrain Wanda are Atlantean in origin. It's long been clear Marvel intended to retcon Scarlet Witch, although there's been intense debate over whether she would become a sorceress, or the MCU's first mutant. WandaVision Episode 8 does the deed, rewriting the history of the MCU by revealing Wanda was a young witch whose power would probably have dwindled as she aged, had she not been exposed to the Mind Stone. This fits with comments from Kevin Feige back in 2016 when he first discussed retconning Scarlet Witch by comparing her powers to Doctor Strange's. But, for all Wanda Maximoff may now truly be a sorceress, WandaVision Episode 8 ends with a gripping moment suggesting her magic is very different from that of the masters of the mystic arts. Agatha Harkness forces Wanda to revisit some of the greatest tragedies of her life, including the fateful day her apartment was bombed during Sokovia's long and violent civil war. She and her brother Pietro were stranded in the rubble for 2 days, looking at the flashing light of an unexploded Stark Industries shell. According to Agatha, there is a reason the bomb did not go off. Wanda wove a simple probability hex over it, disrupting its mechanisms. In the comics, these probability hexes were indeed the first manifestation of Scarlet Witch's mystical powers. The mortar shell carries the logo of Stark Industries, just as discussed in Avengers Age of Ultron. This experience led Wanda and Pietro to view Tony Stark in particular with hatred, and they ultimately volunteered for Hydra's Mind Stone experiments in the hopes of becoming saviors for their country. The WandaVision commercial in Episode 1 was an Easter egg pointing to this scene, showing a Stark Industries toaster with the same flashing light as the unexploded bomb. Wanda's memories move on to her time as a Hydra test subject when she was exposed to the Mind Stone. Oddly enough, these experiments appear to have been quite basic, simply involving placing people in the presence of the Mind Stone. Wanda and her brother Pietro were the only ones to survive exposure. A recent in-universe guidebook, The Wakanda Files, revealed Hydra didn't just settle in Sokovia because they felt they could avoid the world's attention there. They had also observed several genetic anomalies among Sokovians, which they believed would make them perfect test subjects for the Mind Stone experiments. This suggests there may still be a genetic component to Wanda's powers, meaning even now Scarlet Witch could still be a latent mutant as well as a sorceress. Certainly, her brother's transformation into Quicksilver is still unexplained, because it has always seemed odd that the Mind Stone granted an individual superhuman speed. Hydra scientists watch in fascination as the Mind Stone flares with power in Wanda's presence. Wanda herself receives a mysterious vision, one in which she appears to see her future being brought into being. The Scarlet Witch costume worn is lifted straight from the comics but looks a lot better than previous comic book adaptations in WandaVision's Halloween episode. Agatha Harkness's magical mystery tour through Wanda's memories continues, fast-forwarding to the first moment Wanda bonded with Vision in the immediate aftermath of Avengers Age of Ultron. Wanda was grieving the recent death of her brother, and Vision offered her comfort at a time of sorrow, first creating the connection between them. Notice Vision enters by walking through the wall, a habit he still displayed in Captain America Civil War, as he struggled to understand the point of using doors. Agatha Harkness finally figures out why Wanda is so powerful. She wields chaos magic, a force Agatha believed only mythical but which allows Wanda to rewrite creation itself. In the comics, chaos magic is associated with the elder god named Thin, who used it to rule the Earth until he was banished. It was deliberately forgotten by Earth's sorceress because it was viewed as so dangerous, but Scarlet Witch was born in a place where the fabric of reality was thin, and so Thin was able to imbue her with his power. Doctor Strange initially believed chaos magic was just a figment of Wanda's imagination, but the truth was revealed when Thin invaded Earth and mocked the Sorcerer Supreme for his foolishness. Agatha Harkness is shown wearing a costume that's fairly accurate to the comics, although granted it's a little bit sexier given the character has been switched up and is no longer an elderly woman. She's taking a massive risk confronting Wanda out in the open in Westview, presumably gambling that the children give her the edge she needs. But for all her power, Agatha has no idea what's really in play here, because she has forgotten Sword. WandaVision Episode 8 reveals the Vision in Westview is a magical construct, a being created by chaos magic with no physical substance. This explains why he couldn't leave Westview because he had left the area of Wanda's magic. But S.W.O.R.D has repaired the real Vision, who they view as the greatest sentient weapon ever made. Vision's new white design is a striking reference to John Byrne's 1989 comics arcade Vision Quest, in which Vision was disassembled and then restored. The new Vision was a colorless, emotionless synthezoid who considered human life irrelevant, so he's sure to be a force to be reckoned with. So WandaVision Episode 9 brings the show to an end. In the final episode for WandaVision there's a lot that we thought would happen that did happen, and a lot that we hoped and thought would happen, that didn't happen. Either way, it was a truly amazing series. There is a ton of things to break down and Easter eggs, so let's get started. WandaVision Episode 9, the series finale, is packed with MCU Easter eggs and references to Marvel Comics. WandaVision began as a surreal sitcom, a Marvel mystery for fans to try to solve, but it ended as it was always going to, in an explosive, action-packed confrontation in the streets of Westview. The heroes and villains of WandaVision assembled for a fateful confrontation that has the potential to break the world. Every episode of WandaVision has been full of Easter eggs. The show has been carefully weaving for weeks more effectively than a witch would weave a cat's cradle. No doubt some will be disappointed as their favorite fan theories are dismissed, but in truth, WandaVision benefits from being tightly focused on a single family, even as it sets up the newly christened Scarlet Witch for her future in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Wanda swats Agatha Harkness out of the sky by telekinetically using a car as a weapon, a trick she deployed against Iron Man in Captain America Civil War, but when she goes to investigate she finds only Agatha's boots left behind, an amusing nod to the Wizard of Oz, where a dark witch was killed when a house crashed upon her, leaving only her boots sticking out. This is intended as a prank by Agatha, a way of mocking Wanda and demonstrating she's out of her depth. WandaVision Episode 7 saw Wanda Maximoff investigate Agatha Harkness's basement, which the sorceress had crafted as a temple of magic. The centerpiece of Agatha's home was a mysterious book glowing with scarlet power, and in Episode 9 Agatha confirms this is a legendary tome of dark magic called the Darkhold. It contains an entire chapter on the Scarlet Witch, the basis of Agatha's knowledge about Wanda, and so as a result the post-credits scene reveals Wanda has taken the Darkhold and is reading it herself. In the comics, the Darkhold was fashioned by the Elder Godthin, who used Wanda as a pawn to invade the Earth. All this seems like very deliberate foreshadowing for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The design of the Darkhold is very different from the one previously seen in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., pretty much confirming the show should not be considered canon in the mainstream MCU. It's also different from the comics, more reminiscent of the Ironbound books associated with another of the Elder Gods, Shuma-Gorath, so it wouldn't be a surprise to see Marvel merge Thin with other, similar entities. According to Agatha Harkness, the Scarlet Witch's power exceeds that of even the Sorcerer Supreme. That's significant because it means Wanda should be capable of feats of magic that would be beyond even the Ancient One. Disturbingly, though, right now the Earth doesn't have a Sorcerer Supreme to protect it anymore. The Ancient One died in Doctor Strange, and Stephen Strange is yet to prove himself worthy to become the next Sorcerer Supreme. Agatha Harkness claims the Scarlet Witch is destined to destroy the world, presumably alluding to the fact she is an agent of chaos magic, chosen as a pawn by Thin. Later, as the confrontation between Agatha and Wanda comes to an end, she claims Wanda has no idea what she's done by claiming the full power of the Scarlet Witch, specifically that she has no idea what she's unleashed. In the comics, every time chaos magic is used it weakens the fabric of reality, potentially allowing Thin to break through. It is likely something similar is true in the MCU as well. In amidst all the spectacular flares of power, there's one scene in WandaVision Episode 9 where Wanda generates a protective hex over her family in the shape of a force bubble. This is one of Scarlet Witch's trademark powers in the comics, and it's great to see it appear in the MCU, proving the power of chaos magic can indeed be used protectively. While Wanda and Agatha battle it out in the heavens, Monica Rambeau intervenes down on the ground to prevent Wanda's children from being shot by Director Hayward. Repeated exposure to the hex has rewritten Monica's body, granting her superhuman powers of her own. The bullets do not injure her, but instead fly through her body, losing their kinetic energy. In the comics, exposure to extra-dimensional energy transformed Monica into a superhero who's gone by codenames such as Captain Marvel, Photon, and Spectrum. It transformed Monica's body into an energy form. Just as in WandaVision, the comic book version of Monica can indeed absorb the kinetic energy of bullets into herself. The two visions go head-to-head in a dramatic battle of their own that seems tonally similar to the confrontation between Vision and Ultron in Avengers Age of Ultron. In the end, White Vision allows his opponent to tamper with his circuitry. This leads to his experiencing a surge of memories, including scenes from Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, and Avengers Infinity War, right up to the moment of his death. I am Vision, the White Vision realizes, affirming his identity. It's difficult not to be reminded of Tony Stark's declaring himself as Iron Man at the very beginning of the MCU, but this one is a lot more private. Unlike Tony Stark, it looks as though the restored Vision will keep out of the limelight, simply because the public still believed him dead in the In Memoriam video in Spider-Man Far From Home, set months later. Wanda resorts to a familiar technique during her battle with Agatha Harkness, invading her mind to experience a shared, warped memory that goes wrong. This is the same technique Scarlet Witch used in Avengers Age of Ultron, and Wanda's hand gestures are identical. Unfortunately, the effect is far less effective, because Agatha Harkness is no stranger to this kind of magic. When Wanda Maximoff manifests her full power, she finally becomes the Scarlet Witch, wearing the costume she glimpsed in a vision years ago when she was exposed to the Mind Stone. The design is fascinating, a blend of modern designs from Wanda's time in the Uncanny Avengers and James Robinson's tremendous Scarlet Witch run. It's been significantly improved to avoid exposing too much cleavage, which will please Elizabeth Olsen. She's previously complained about how much cleavage Scarlet Witch's costumes show. The traditional Scarlet Witch headdress appears to demonstrate Wanda's claiming her power. In the same way, a similar headdress manifested over Agatha's mother in a flashback in WandaVision Episode 8. Scarlet Witch reveals a part of the Mind Stone lives in her and manifested itself in the creation of Westview's Vision, explaining the flare of yellow energy as Vision's body was formed. This is a fascinating scene, with enormous implications for the MCU in that it appears to confirm the Mind Stone bound itself to Wanda when she was exposed to its power during the Hydra experiments. Given Vision was such a noble and heroic character, this further supports the theory the Mind Stone contains a degree of sentience, and, indeed, that it is good. Thanos may have destroyed the Infinity Stones in Avengers Endgame, but the Russo brothers confirmed they aren't gone from the MCU, merely reduced to an atomic level. Thus the Mind Stone could yet return. WandaVision's mid-credits scene sees Monica Rambeau approached by a Skrull who is working for a friend of her mother's, and seeks her help on a space mission. Spider-Man Far From Home's post-credits scene confirmed Nick Fury is in an alliance with the Skrulls on a mysterious mission to space, and it's safe to assume Monica is there with him. This sets up Monica Rambeau to be a key player in Marvel's upcoming Secret Invasion series on Disney+, which is expected to deal with alien sleeper cells on Earth. Interestingly, note there's no suggestion Nick Fury is working with S.W.O.R.D., rather, he seems to be an independent operator on a mission of his own, so some popular theories he has taken charge of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s replacement may be incorrect. Scarlet Witch is seen reading the Darkhold by using a sort of astral duplicate, allowing her to do two things at once. This is the same approach Stephen Strange used in Doctor Strange, allowing him to absorb significant knowledge at speed. Wanda has grown significantly in her powers, given she is doing this without any hint of formal training at all. Scarlet Witch's studies are interrupted when she senses Billy and Tommy calling out for help. She had believed the twins were gone, but clearly, that's not the case. In the comics, the twins were forged with fragments of Mephisto's soul, so Wanda could well be being manipulated once again. Alternatively, the twins were ultimately reincarnated as Wiccan and Speed, members of the Young Avengers, so it's possible they're set to return in some manner. Marvel's Phase 4 seems to be setting up Young Avengers, with several other potential members confirmed or anticipated. So don't count the twins out just yet.
Look, we've all been there, right? Letting our fear and anger get the best of us. intentionally expanding the borders of the false world we created.
Unusual couple.
It was really so fun getting to play all these different decades throughout Wandavision.
We just don't know what to expect.
And then, of course, everything kind of breaks down and becomes an MCU version of the real world.
Am I dead?
No. Why would you think that?
Because you are. Can't believe how it just keeps unraveling and unfolding in ways that I am still shocked and thrilled by.
Wanda, I think something's wrong here. I think it's going to be really satisfying for people when they realize what is at the heart of this show.
This is our home.
Then let's fight for it.
The last couple of episodes have revealed some interesting details about WandaVision that weren't immediately clear from the beginning of the show. But last week's episode Scarlet Witch Hex proved that she's the most powerful character of MCU. If you remembered, the Avengers Endgame proved Scarlet Witch could beat Thanos on her own, but WandaVision confirmed she has become even more powerful than a Celestial. It's not a secret that Scarlet Witch is one of the most powerful superheroes in the MCU, but WandaVision Episode 6 confirmed Wanda Maximoff is the all-time strongest when she expanded the perimeter of the Hex. Wanda's idealized town is by itself a testament to the impressive amount of power her magic abilities hold, as it isn't a mere illusion, but a place where the fabric of reality is rewritten. Anybody and anything that enters Westview changes at a molecular level, and anybody and anything that comes out is permanently changed. Wanda's abilities are so strong that they seem to be more effective than the Reality Stone, which didn't appear to affect anything permanently when used by Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. The superpowers of Wanda and her twin brother Pietro come from Hydra's experiments with the Mind Stone, which was previously embedded in Loki's scepter. The Infinity Stones are known to awaken superpowers in living beings. For instance, the Tesseract gave Captain Marvel super strength, flight, photon blasts, and her binary mode. The Mind Stone gave Vision a conscience, the Soul Stone made Red Skull immortal, and the Time Stone helped Doctor Strange defeat Dormammu inside his dimension. This is why Wanda's powers are so strong, but her genetic disposition, which may be the beginning of the development of mutants, also accentuates her abilities. Besides, Wanda's anger has increased her power level, and WandaVision just revealed that she now could hold her own against a Celestial. The best proof of Wanda's immense power came in Avengers Endgame and was mentioned in WandaVision Episode 5, where Darcy Lewis, Jimmy Woo, and Monica Rambeau discussed Wanda's performance in the movie's final battle. Monica correctly explained that Wanda could have defeated Thanos by herself had he not ordered his troops to rain fire on the Avengers. WandaVision Episode 6 showed that Wanda is even more powerful now when she expanded the Hex effortlessly, rewriting reality to her will within a radius of various kilometers. For comparison, the Celestial Ego needed the help of his half-celestial son Peter Quill in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 to terraform Earth and other planets. If Wanda's goals were aimed toward conquest, she could easily use all of her power to swallow up huge landmasses and possibly the entire Earth all alone and without breaking a sweat. Fortunately, Wanda's only goal is to have a peaceful life with Vision. But still, she claimed a small portion of the planet and, quite literally, made it her own. Wanda also transformed S.W.O.R.D. into a circus. I will explain in my next video why she does that, which is a representation of what she thinks of the intrusive organization. Ego didn't have the freedom to choose how the planets he terraforms would look, and his method of expansion makes him more reminiscent of a galactic-level parasite rather than an intelligent entity. All of this serves to prove that it's better to keep Wanda from switching to an offensive stance, because if she does, hardly anyone would be able to stop her. As Wanda's power grows, she becomes more prone to losing her temper and lashing out, which would possibly require the intervention of Doctor Strange and the beginning of Doctor Strange, in the Multiverse of Madness. The expansion of the Hex was so powerful that it instantly restored Vision's dying body, and so effective that it demonstrated how Wanda could change reality to a greater degree if she wanted. Perhaps if she's pushed over the edge, a couple of meaningful words can finally break the multiverse open and introduce mutants to the MCU. So that's all, guys. At this point, let me know all your thoughts down below and check out one of our newest videos right here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned with us so you will never miss a single one. I'm Freddy from Unscreen.